Welcome to episode 25 of the Everyday Sens podcast. I'm Jack Richardson, joined by Brennan Parks, and obviously we have a very special guest. For those on the YouTube, you are already aware. If you're listening on the audio, we're joined by Ian Mendes, the senior writer at The Athletic for the Ottawa Senators. So Ian, how are you doing today? And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, guys, listen, this is great. No place I'd rather be on a Sunday morning than hanging with the two of you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's our pleasure. I mean, you do great work over at The Athletic, of course. Today we're kind of just going to go over everything. We've been breaking down a couple episodes a week. We've been talking about all sorts of Sens stuff. Obviously, the DeBrincat trade is still kind of in the headlines, but like we said on our last pod, it's been kind of radio silence since then. There's been some turmoil in the organization. We just wanted to start, though, talking about your summer trip and your summer in general, but especially, you went to see Tim Stützle. We know that. There's a picture of you and you talked to DJ Smith at the World Championship. You went to Wrexham. So how was that trip and how was visiting Tim in his hometown?
Oh, I'm super excited whenever that feature is going to drop. And I don't know, I've transcribed it all. I haven't with my editorial team. We're trying to find the right spot to drop it in. It's kind of a dead part in the calendar right now. So part of the thinking is actually this is a really good time to drop a story about Tim Stützle because there's, people are thirsty for content. We've got something. But then the flip side of the coin is, well, a lot of people are checked out for the summer. They're not really interested. So I think we're just batting this around. But I got a full, like when I say a full day with Tim, I mean, I spent 7.5 hours with him, something like that, 8 hours with him straight. Flew to his hometown, which is about 20 minutes outside of Dusseldorf, and just had a phenomenal day with him. And I'm excited to relay that to Ottawa fans. I went for lunch with him and his mom. And it was very casual in the sense of, I said to them, look, during lunch, I'll slide the recorder on the table, but we'll just chat kind of like we're just chat. This isn't going to be formal. And it was great. And I'm trying to think of what would be a good anecdote to tell you as a good little teaser. Like I got to go to the home that he grew up in. And so getting a chance to, go up and see like his trophy case, so to speak, or like he's got every jersey that he's ever worn back from the time he was a little kid, and they're all in his closet. And it was a great opportunity to spend time with him. I just realized here's my favorite part that I want to tell you guys. And I don't know if I'll put this into this story because I don't know. I don't love inserting myself into stories. But I thought it was funny. I said to Tim and his mom at some point, because I did this, if you guys remember, I did kind of a similar feature on Shane Pinto back in, I don't know when that was, February, March. And I got some time at Shane's house, met his family, and they kind of took me through his childhood bedroom, all that stuff, okay? And I don't want to be known as like the creepy reporter that's like, can I see your childhood bedroom? Because that does kind of get weird, but there's often a story to be told there, right? Like you can often see little signs or tidbits or things, like just little things. So I say to Tim and his mom, I said, at some point I'd love a full tour and maybe, you could show me the bedroom you grew up in. And all of a sudden his mom and him get into a bit of a discussion. And now they switch into German. Like, so I don't know what they're saying to each other. And, because they can easily go back and forth, English, German, and they start speaking each other in German or whatever. And his mom looks at me with a really disappointed face and says, I told him to clean his room today and he didn't clean his room. And so I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, this guy's got a $65 million contract or whatever. But it was a great reminder that like, he's only 21 years old. Like he still has that relationship with his parents that I think a lot of I'm now on the other side. We have a 19-year-old daughter. So like, I understand that dynamic. And so what I did is I said, listen, hang on a second. And I went back in my camera roll and I found a picture of my daughter's dorm room. And I showed it to Tim's mom because my daughter's just like me. Like I was a super messy, kind of unorganized, disorganized teenager or whatever. My wife would argue I'm still in my 40s, very messy and disorganized. And I show a picture of my daughter's dorm room to Tim's mom and said, don't worry, I'm sure I've seen worse. She looks at my phone. She's like, okay, you can go up there. Like, it was great. But like, I really appreciated my takeaway from that story. And I think what's going to end up being kind of the hook or the anchor to this at some point is, yes, Tim Stutzle's got a, whatever that is, $65 million contract, but I don't think his parents are going to allow this young man to kind of have that go to his head. Like, he's going to be, the people around him appear to be very grounded. There's some good anecdotes that I think I'm going to be able to tell about that. But they are just a typical family. There's nothing like, I think when you see a lot of hockey families, they come from upper middle class or, high end families, where this is just like a regular working class family in Germany that just happened to produce, arguably the most talented player that's ever put on an Ottawa jersey. You're certainly going to be in that conversation. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I appreciated the fact that I got a chance to go over there and spend, a day with him, because it's, I think he's going to be the most fascinating player on this roster.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? I just moved home from school, and I'm going through the exact same thing where it's funny, and you think about it in that context. Tim is just a guy who's moved home for the summer, and he's 21 years old, but he's also a $64 million hockey player. He's the highest paid senator in Ottawa, in Senators history, which is crazy to think about. Just one more thing on that I wanted to ask you, because I remember I'm going way back here to 2008 when the Sens drafted Erik Karlsson. I know you had a great piece then, spending a day with Karlsson in Ottawa. I want to say,
yeah.
Did you find any, because you mentioned him being might be the most dynamic player in Senators history. I think Karlsson's right up there, obviously, with him. Do you notice any similarities between the two of them? This is kind of just an off the cuff question. I just immediately thought about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I remember I pitched the idea to the Senators. I said, can I take Erik Karlsson to IKEA? And I think they were like, what the hell are you talking about? I was like, I just think it would be a fun backdrop for a story to take this teenager who you just drafted that nobody knows. I'm just going to take him to IKEA. I want to just go have lunch. I'll have lunch with him at IKEA. And we went to Pinecrest, and like nobody recognized him at IKEA. Like nobody, like he was 18 years old, right? Like he was this scrawny little kid. The one thing I would say that there's a bit of a similarity is the uber confidence in themselves, like at that age, that Erik never, I don't think, ever battled self-doubt, which is a really good characteristic, I think, in a hockey player. Like he didn't, there's a lot of hockey players that deal with performance anxiety, pressure, all these things. Erik Karlsson at 18 was like, I think he knew he was going to be good. I think Tim has that same sort of confidence in him. It's just, and it's not like, I know some people will say that it like on Erik, it borders on cockiness or whatever. I don't know. There's a fine line there. I think you have to have that in you. And I see that for sure, the similarity in that. And I think the other thing too is that like Erik's background, like his parents, like his dad, I think had a, when he was growing up, very modest, again, kind of almost blue collar, farming type of background, that type of thing. Like when you drive out to Tim Stutzle's house that he grew up in Germany, like you're driving and it's just like grass, fields, sheep, grazing and you're like, I was like, because I took like an Uber to his house from Dusseldorf, and it was like, said like 29 minutes or whatever. And as I'm driving, I'm looking at my Uber and it says you're 5 minutes from your destination. And I'm looking around, there's like literally sheep grazing in the middle of nowhere. And I think that's similar to Erik Karlsson in that, like Erik kind of grew up in the, like in that sort of, you wouldn't expect that to be the backdrop to produce one of the most talented players in the history of the Ottawa Senators.
Well, and Tim, like I think you said, there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness, and you see that with a lot of players, right? But Tim, like from the day he was drafted, and he was obviously on that video call when he got picked, you've never gotten this sense of cockiness. Like he's not someone who you said doubts himself, but he's also not someone who is a little like overzealous in the way he presents himself. Like he's able to kind of walk the fine line, which I think is what makes him such a great athlete, right? Is that he's not, he's not this, even on the ice, he's not this selfish player who you look at and they're like, this guy's going to be good, but he's not going to be next level good because he's just caring about himself and his points. He said himself, like, he's all about the team. He scored 90 points this year, but he still would rather win than score points. I think he said that after they lost and he scored like 4 points or something. So a very humble guy, right?
Yeah. And I think that, again, that's going to be reflected in my story in, I think, even his approach to that last contract where, let's be honest, I don't know what you guys think. I'd be curious to get your take on this. If Tim Stützle didn't sign the extension in September, he played out his year and was a pending RFA, I think he pushes $10 million a year, or at least is in the conversation for a $10 million a year contract. Like I think the very best centers in the league right now, if you ask me who are the very best 3 or 4 centers, I would say McDavid. I guess if we consider Draisaitl as center, Draisaitl, McKinnon is in there. Tim is getting into that. He's not in that tier, but there's a next tier with like Jack Hughes and that Elias Pettersson and those guys. I think Tim is about to enter that sphere if he's not already. So kind of maybe somewhere between 5 and 12, the best centers in the game. And you start to look at his age and his trajectory and all that. How do you not sign him to $10 million a year? But what I love about him is I think he would take less, well, he did, to make sure that there was a little bit more for everybody else. And that's what you want, right? Like, that's what you, like, for all this stuff about Ottawa, like, to be able to get their core guys, now Sanderson might be different, but they've gotten everybody under 8.5. That's pretty good with the cap going up. Like, that's pretty good for where they're at. And to get somebody to buy in, to me, that shows that he appears to be, or he is, a team first guy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think something made out of nightmares. There's some multiverse somewhere where they didn't sign him to that extension last September, and he's pushing for 10. There's an RFA holdout going into this season. It could be a nightmare, but luckily that's not the case. There are a lot of other things for the Ottawa Senators to deal with, talk about this offseason. Let's start with expectations going into next year. I know you've written about it. We've talked about it, that it's time. I think we can all agree it's time for them to push. But where do you see internal expectations for the team? I know Dorion talked about it on TSN 1200, just saying they don't want to put a label on it just yet.
Yep.
When he went in in studio last week. So what are your thoughts just on team expectations going into next season?
Well, they have to be for the playoffs. Like, there's no other. They've reached or achieved the rebuild is over, and we've played meaningful games, right? Like, they did that last year. If we want to say that they achieved the goal of playing games that mattered, they did, right? Because it was the day after the trade deadline was that home game against Columbus where fans were chanting, "We want playoffs." So hey, hang the mission accomplished banner. They did it, right? Like, they accomplished what they needed. So really, there's no other step to take other than make the playoffs. Like, you've competed for the playoffs and fallen short. Now you make the playoffs. Now, whether or not they verbalize that, or they put that into writing, I don't think it matters now. I think that is the expectation from the fan base. I think that is the expectation from the core of the players. I don't think Brady Tkachuk is interested in another year of, we were this close. I think Tim Stützle is entering that first year of that contract. I think he'd love to make the playoffs every year of that contract. And so I think that has to be the expectation. What they can't control are the external factors, which I think will make this a challenge, which is, if you look at the Eastern Conference and you look at the 8 playoff teams, I think I'm having a hard time. I think me personally, I lock in Carolina. I lock in New Jersey. I would lock in the Rangers. I see people debating, but I would. Take a look at this. Like, when you look at the standings, like, of these 8 teams, who are you like, maybe the Islanders, maybe the Panthers. Okay. And I think the Bruins are due for a massive regression, but are they going to go from greatest regular season team of all time to out of the playoffs? I mean, it would be historic, but I don't know. I think at worst they're going to be a 95 to 100 point playoff team. So the problem for Ottawa isn't even just that. It's Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Detroit. All three of those teams are going to enter the season with playoff expectations, right? Like, so there's 4 teams that are coming into September saying, we want to make the playoffs next year. If Ottawa was just by themselves and everyone else was at a different point in their rebuild or where they're at, we're having a different discussion. Washington's the team. I don't know what to make of them, but I think when you have Alex Ovechkin kind of in his prime, I think playoffs remain a priority for you. But this is going to be the problem. Yeah, you can say playoffs, but the bar, it's going to be pretty tough to make the playoffs in the Eastern Conference next year.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we kind of smiled at each other when you said that, because we actually, one of our questions was about how Ottawa stacks up in the Atlantic Division, just because it's so competitive and it's not really somewhere you want to be right now. Looking like how do you think they stack up against a Buffalo and a Detroit specifically, because those are really the 3 teams who are going to be trying to make the next step this year?
Yeah, you know, I had a great conversation with Tampa head coach John Cooper Tampa came 2 times to Ottawa in March, and it was like within 2 weeks. And at one of those trips, I got, I don't know, like a few minutes with John Cooper. And I asked John specifically, I said, can you look at, help me out? And John Cooper is one of the most insightful, helpful coaches in the game. There's a lot of coaches that if I went to them and said, hey, help me break, like if I went to John Tortorella and said, hey, can you help me break down? He'd be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, just get out of here. I don't have time. I can barely talk about my own team, let alone the other team. But John is really insightful. And so I said to him, like, do you see any similarities amongst Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, to kind of where your Tampa team was a few years ago? Like, they've all got good cores. They're all going. Like at what point do you see them, those 3 teams, pushing you, Boston, and Toronto? That's the way I asked. And we kind of left Florida out of it because at that time they were like in between. I didn't know what to make of them. But he gave me such a good answer. And he said, it might be next year. It might be the year after. He said there's going to be one season in the Atlantic Division where everybody meets in the middle around 95 points. He says, you know, we're going to be, basically, to paraphrase, we're going to be on the escalator down with Boston and Toronto. And Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit are going to be on the escalator going up. And there's going to be a magical season. And he said it's going to be pure chaos. And I think you can make an argument, maybe it's this upcoming year, because there are significant questions. As I said, Boston, question marks, right? Like, we don't know what Bergeron's going to do or how they're going to replace him or how they get with Krejci and all these. Like, they've had some turnover. So Taylor Hall's gone, Bertuzzi's gone. Like, they've had some changes. I don't see them being a 120-point team, let alone whatever they had last year, like with 65 wins. So they could regress. Toronto's had a bit of a regime change. The course of there, but there's some questions about goaltending and how that will play out. Tampa Bay's certainly, I think, on that escalator down where you don't look at them like, I think they'll be a good team, but this could be the year. This could be the year they all meet. And I think if I was looking, I would say Buffalo is an inch ahead of Ottawa in my mind, but not like a long way away. The interesting one will be Detroit, because you see them say, hey, we got DeBrincat. This is pushing us into win now mode. And if you go back a year, that's what we were saying about Ottawa. Hey, you get Alex DeBrincat, you're into win now mode. So they all have expectations to win, and I would love it if the John Cooper chaos season happened this year, because I think it would be a lot of fun. It would be a lot of fun for Ottawa, Buffalo, and Detroit fans, and I think maybe not so much for the other 3, because they could see the decline starting to happen for them.
It's really interesting because I know last season, I don't want to say I was drinking the Kool-Aid, but I was buying into the Sens being a top team in the Atlantic. I could see it happening. And realistically, I think they played well enough to be one for the majority of the year. They just really didn't put it together early on in the year. And I know, Brennan, I don't think we kind of mapped this out in the questions either. I'm going off the cuff again, but Ian, we were looking at their schedule to begin the season. And before that Sweden trip, it is very favorable for the Sens early on in the year when they need to be better because they haven't in the last few years. There are literally zero excuses before that Sweden trip to not have a good start. I think it's something like 9 home games out of 13 or something like that. I might just be paraphrasing there, but it's a lot of home games in October and November. In terms of expectations, and we'll loop this into tryout season. Is it tryout season for Pierre Dorion and DJ Smith under Michael Landlauer? Do you get the sense maybe that it's make or break November if they're not well over 500, that it's new regime in if they don't do well?
Yeah, that and I don't think that that's unrealistic or I just don't think that's unrealistic. Look, and I had a really good conversation with DJ Smith in Nashville at the draft. And this was after kind of, it was confirmed that he was coming back as the coach. And I thought he was really insightful with me. Like, I always appreciate his ability to understand. Like, he knows that he's under the gun. Like, if you go back and read some of the quotes he gave me, it was like, hey, I do have to change the way I coach them. He knows that. He knows he has to be a little bit tougher. They need to be a little bit more detail oriented. He mentioned that when we get to training camp, like, I have to have my line set right away. Like, I want this to hit the ground running. So I think in his mind, it's going to be Sanderson and Zub and Shabbat and Chikrin. And then, whatever, Brandstrom, Hamannek, however, like, I think that part is set. I think the line combos up front maybe it'll hinge if there's one other move, but they have to hit the ground running. And you look at the way the schedule is, and this is a byproduct of going to Sweden. There is a week before the Sweden, like, they basically have, like, I think they play Calgary, and I apologize, I don't have the schedule in front of me. I think they play Calgary like on a Saturday. Then they have a few days off, and then they play those Sweden games later that week against Minnesota and Detroit or whatever. Then they have another. Look, you guys are amazing. Look at this. You guys just bring it right up. So take a look at this, and you'll see that they have the window there. Yeah, it's Calgary, then basically 5 days, then Detroit and Minnesota, and then look at that. Again, another roughly 6 days between that Minnesota and the Islander game. That, to me, whether it's before the Sweden trip or after, it's a natural point in time to have a very clear-headed, clear-eyed observation of where is this group. And if they're struggling at 500, they're below 500, I think it's okay to say it's time for a change. But you give them that opportunity. You give them the 15 games. But the way that the schedule is laid out, it is perfectly there to make a change if you need to make a change. And they have to know the pressures. Like, let me ask you guys this question. Can you name me another coach in the NHL who will start the season on such a hot seat as DJ Smith? And he knows that. He knows that. I was like racking my brain because I thought a little bit of Sheldon Keefe because there's a new general manager in Treliving. That's not his guy. There was some talk. Is he coming back? Is he not? Maybe if Toronto gets off to a pedestrian start, maybe they turn up the temperature on Sheldon Keefe's seat. But I don't know if I can think of a guy who's going to take over or start in October with more heat on him from the fan base internally than DJ Smith.
Yeah, I definitely cannot name one. I think I don't know if it was The Athletic or it might have been a betting site. There was something I saw on Twitter the other day that said like a bunch of people ranked their hot seat coaches, and Smith was like 50% above everyone else in the league. Like, he is definitely going to be at the forefront of it might be rough for him if they start off rough. That's how I'll put it. It's going to be kind of, go ahead, Jack, if you got something.
So this is where expectations, it kind of comes in, right? Yeah. So looking at that schedule, and after the Sweden trip is a good place to analyze it. Do you think I personally think we should expect them to be top 3 in the division after that Sweden trip. I don't think that's crazy at all. Just the schedule is so favorable. They've been a really good home team under DJ the last 2 years. The road games have been the problem. Not many road games early on. So if they are 500, and even if that is still a playoff spot at the time, technically, I don't know if I would be content with that. I think that's still a little bit underwhelming given how heavy the expectations were, because I think last November, mid-November, around then, I want to say they were just under 500, just around there. It was just towards the end of November when they had that game in Anaheim against the Ducks for the battle for last place at the end of November.
Yeah.
I'll remember that one. Never forget that one, because then they put it all together all of a sudden. But yeah, like that for expectations for me, like overall in the season, I think this can be a top three team in the division. And I think that's reasonable to expect. So after that trip in Sweden, I'm expecting them to be pushing for at least third in the Atlantic Division.
Man, remember that Western trip? It was right around American Thanksgiving, right? And they were just the thing was careening off a cliff. Then they go and they beat Anaheim like 5-0 or 5-1, whatever it was. And we're like, Anaheim's terrible. The key for me, the season-saving game, was the LA game. Was it on a Sunday night when Stützle hit Giroux on that crazy overtime? Like, that was the one where you actually felt like, you know what? I think that might have been a job-saving goal. Like, it just felt like the whole thing was ready to come unhinged. And that one seemed to stabilize them. And that's the second year in a row, right? Because go back the previous year, it went off a cliff in November. And if it wasn't for Anton Forsberg on that Thursday night in Carolina, where he makes 45, whatever, I think it was a Thursday night, whatever it was, he made save after save. And you're like, if they lose this game, something's got to give. Because like the previous game they played at home against Vancouver was terrible. And was it like JT Miller who went full Connor McDavid on like 4 guys? You're like, this is ridiculous. Like this is an absolute gong show. And Forsberg saved them. Last year it was, but we can't get to the point where we're looking for some season-saving moment in November. This season-saving moment has to come opening night in Carolina, home opener against Philly. Next night, I think they play Tampa, whatever it is. Like don't save your season in October, guys. And I think they know that. They understand that.
So building off of that, I think consistency is kind of one of the main points here, but what needs to go right for Ottawa to be like to meet their expectations this year? Like what are the factors behind a playoff team? Like aside from obviously consistency, and I think you'd probably the first thing that comes to mind for me is certainly health. I think that's a major thing, but I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, and I hate to boil things down into such simplistic terms, but the one thing I like, this is where I'll defend DJ Smith, and I know that he's got his detractors in this marketplace, and I understand where they're coming from. Don't like when I give you this answer, I want you to know that I understand the shortcomings. I understand all that. The one thing that has been completely out of DJ Smith's control that he's never had for even one season is a consistent, stable goaltender. Like, not any season. Like, you could argue the year he had Craig Anderson, which was the year that got interrupted by COVID in March, so 2019, 2020, that's the most stable goaltending he ever had. And that was like 38-year-old Craig Anderson at the end of the line. Because you go through that COVID-shortened season, remember how many times they had to roll Marcus Högberg out, and it wasn't there. They went to Joey Decord, Phil Gustafson. Matt Murray was in and out, and it was terrible. Then the following year, it was Matt Murray was banished to Belleville. Anton Forsberg saved it. Last season, we know it was Cam Talbot repeatedly injured. Like, I want to see, like, if you're asking me what's one, like, if I could choose one thing, and I would take this, believe it or not, I would take this over health. Goaltending. Give me 65 games this season where Ottawa's goaltending is really good. Like, you have to expect 15 to 20 games. You're just going to get garbage goaltending, average goaltending, whatever. But that number can't be like half the games. It can't be. So I would say if Ottawa gets capable, competent goaltending, I think married with that top 4 that I think we all feel pretty comfortable with that top 4 on D, don't we? Like I do. If they're all healthy, then I think there's enough offensive firepower even without Alex DeBrincat that, Norris coming in. I think Norris is a 25 to 30 goal guy. I think Dominic Kubalik is a 20-goal guy if he stays healthy. Timmy, I think, could score 40. Brady, I think you could pencil him in for 30, 35. Claude is a 25 goal guy. Like, goal scoring is not going to be a problem. It's keeping the puck out of your net. That's the problem for Ottawa. Give me good goaltending. I think this could be a playoff team.
I think that's a good point, because it all comes down to goaltending. If the goalie doesn't save the puck, it doesn't matter. I think that was my first thought when they signed Korpisalo, right? Big contract. Everyone's talking about the term and the dollars and how, the cap and everything. And all I was thinking is just stop the puck. I don't care. I don't care who it is. And I know DJ kind of has the same mentality. He says it all the time. We just can't get a save. But you're right. He hasn't had consistent goaltending. And even if it wasn't, they've had stretches of really good play. Like Cam Talbot last year in December was phenomenal. He was outstanding in December. Yep. They had Matt Sogard be the rookie of the month in February. They had good stretches. It was just never consistent, right? You couldn't, as a fan, I knew that, going into any given night, it's a coin flip. And I'm sure the coach felt the same way. To me, one of the biggest things that I think they still addressed, and, positive regression should happen too. DeBrincat was a big part of that, but in general, 5-on-5 scoring outside of the top line needed to improve. And, there were a lot of detractors, I think, this season for Dorion not getting better depth for scoring and all that, and finishing. I mean, their shooting percentage at 5-on-5 was not good outside of the top three guys, obviously. But I'm looking at DeBrincat, and he went and got one of the best finishers in the league last summer, and he just didn't finish, quite simply. Like, he had all the chances in the world. They were, Brennan, I think, what were they? They were 8th in expected goals for, or something like that this season.
Yeah, it was something like that, and then 26th in actual goals for. It was just absurd.
So that naturally that gap should close. And we talk a lot about depth and who they got to add, and is it enough? And I guess what expectations and all this, as it stands right now, we're recording on Sunday, July 16th. Things can change on a dime. We know that. But Ian, as it stands right now, the roster, the depth chart, all of that, do you think this is a playoff team? I know we asked that already, kind of, but with the roster they have. So basically I'm asking, do you think they need to add another forward before the season starts?
Like, yes, they do. I think you absolutely, there's two things that are missing, in my opinion, from this lineup. One is, give me one more really good middle six winger. And, whoever you want to say that is, like, even if it's Scott Lawton, I'm okay with that. Like just give me a legitimate guy that could maybe score 15 goals. Like, you know what? Like Connor Brown or Nick Paul. And I'm not trying to pick at a scab here, but like that type of guy, like a really good 200-foot responsible player. I'm not looking for a ton of goals. I'm looking for responsible play, but chip in with 12, 15 goals. That's one element. The other is, they need to figure out Matthew Joseph in a hurry. And I think if you get Matthew Joseph back up and running, looking like the guy that he was in his 12-game audition or 11-game audition in 21-22, where he had like point a game and like looked like he could be a really good middle six guy who sometimes played up in a top six role as needed, this is going to take away a lot of the issues in Ottawa. Get Matthew Joseph up and running, get one more guy, and I think you're good. I don't think you'll have the issues that we're talking about. If you don't have those two things, it looks awfully thin in that group. And I'm a big believer in Shane Pinto, but he's got to get a little bit of support.
Well, the way I was putting it too is, when it comes to being thin, like, I know we all like to bank on health and everything, but if Josh Norris gets hurt and you don't have another player, then you're kind of back to where you were. And then you're really putting a lot of pressure on like Ridley Gregg, on the prospects to step up and fill those roles. I think too, like even Zach McEwen, I kind of see him as a 13th forward type of guy, but without adding anyone else, he's going to be your every game fourth line forward. I think replacing DeBrincat by adding two middle six guys and Kubalik and somebody else would be awesome. Like, I'd be all for that. And they've got $5 million in cap space before Pinto, so that's maybe $2 or $3 million right now in flexibility to add somebody. You could probably get not somebody game breaking, but if you look at like a Thomas Tatar, who's been largely linked by fans, that's the type of guy I'd love to add to the third line, right? So for me, I think you're absolutely spot on with that. And I'm just going to kind of spin that into where you think Ottawa's biggest strength is right now in the lineup, because I think for us, we agreed last time, and I won't say what it is, but What do you think is their strength? Because I think last season we might have said the star power up front, but now I think that might look a little bit different on paper.
I think it's the top four on
Yeah.
D. Like I really do, guys. And it's crazy because I felt like for the last heck, even when they went to the conference final in 2017, people were like pulling their hair out saying CC and Phaneuf is just terrible. Like, you know, like it's felt like the better part of a decade in which we've been searching for a top four group. Like there's always been the really good, whether it's Karlsson and Meth or, you know, whatever the Shabbat, like there's all the first pairing has never been the problem. Like there's been a legitimate first pairing guy. It's the second pairing. And when you have, like, I think Jake Sanderson has the opportunity and the ability this season to firmly establish himself as the number one defenseman on this team. I really do. I think you're going to see him unlock a little bit more of his creativity, his offensive side. And so if you put him and Zub together and let's say they're playing 22 to 24 a night, Shabbat and Chychrun are playing 22, 24 a night. Guess what that means? That means 48 minutes of your night, almost 50 minutes of your evening, have those players on the ice for you. That's huge. Like, and I, excuse me, I know that I'm seen as like an Eric Brandstrom truther, and I really like the guy. And you're telling me Eric Brandstrom's your third pairing guy who might only play 12 to 15 minutes? Like, that's pretty good. Like, I don't know. I think that this is finally, and I feel so weird uttering these words out loud, but I think the blue line is the Ottawa Senators' biggest strength.
You've come to the right place because we've been beating that drum. That's exactly what we've been saying.
We love Brandstrom.
We are big Brandstrom guys as well. The thing is, too, their top four is great. To me, the reason I think the blue line is the strength is because Eric Brandstrom's your fifth defenseman. You have that flexibility. We just talked about if someone goes down up front, a little big hole there. If Norris, even if Stützle goes down, let's say, it's a big hole up the middle, even though their center ice is probably probably their next best strength, I would say, right? Just in terms of health and who's there. But defense, if Chychrun goes down for a bit, you just slide Brandstrom up. That's still a solid top four to me, which I really like. So I'm impressed that it took, let's not get this wrong, it took a long time to get this blue line right. I mean, Shabbat's halfway through his contract here, and they finally have a strong blue line. But the thing is, too, you mentioned Jake Sanderson being the number one defenseman. I think they've got three number one guys on their blue line right now. I think Chychrun's a number one on a lot of teams in the league. Sanderson's got the potential to be the one on this team. Yeah. And if Shabbat, I mean, I know he had a all around production wise decent season last year, but I think fans can unanimously agree if he has a bounce back of any kind, just fixes some of the, little mistakes he was making. It was an up and down year for him for sure. That's another number one defenseman, and they've got three of them. And there's the I'm gonna pivot again. Do you like the philosophy of having that kind of top four, or are you of the mind, let's get one of these guys on the ice at all times, which is what they went with, I think, when they traded for Chychrun. That was the early one, because I love having one of all three on the ice at all times. No question.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a great debate to be had, right? Like, do you put out one guy so that every pairing has the one stud who can move the puck? Chychrun would be one, Shabbat would be one, Sanderson would be one, right? And then you try and figure out Brandstrom, Zub, and whether it's Hamonic, JBD, Clevin, whatever, you do that. There is an argument to be made that way. But boy, I tend to think I would rather, for the most part, because special teams will be a factor. Again, if you're getting those guys out there for 45 to 50 minutes a night, and they're paired with their strongest potential partner, boy, like Shabbat and Chychrun together, in theory, should be really good. Like, again, there's going to be maybe some left side, right side stuff to work out, but in theory, that should be really good. Sanderson Zub will be very efficient and very good, I think, at shutting down the other team's top line. I don't know that I'd want to necessarily break them up, but it's a good discussion to have, because then that way you could always say, at some point, Jake Chikrin's on the ice, Shabbat's on the ice, Sanderson's on the ice at all times, not at some time, all times. So I guess we'll have to see how the third pairing does. If they're like getting caved in and they're giving up a lot of goals, and this is then yeah, I think you readjust on the fly. But boy, I think you stack it. You just stack your best four guys and you see what they can do.
So just quickly, Brennan, I'll throw in here. I think to me, it depends on their top 9 forwards. If I know last season, it felt like a waste to have your third pair be so strong, but then in the rotation, you're throwing them out with Dylan Gambrell, Patrick Brown, and Joseph on the third line, right? That's not ideal. So if their top 9, you know, if the third line ends up looking something, when healthy, obviously, looks something like Pinto, you know, throw Batherson on there and Kubalik for some reason, if they get a big trade going, you know, you mix it up, then in that sense, I think it makes sense to have one of the 3 on a third pair, right? You just balance it out. So there's no weakness really, right? But yeah, Brennan, go. It does depend on the third line to me, because if they don't have a super solid third line going into the season, I think stacking the top 4 is probably the way to go.
Yeah, and the thing with Ottawa's top 3 defensemen there, who are all kind of number 1 guys, is they're all minute munchers. Like, they can all play ridiculous amounts of minutes, and they have, respectively. I think Chikrin played like 23, 24 minutes over the last 4 seasons, and Shabbat obviously led the league for a while there too. One other aspect of their defense, though, is the depth. That's what I really like that they haven't really had in the past as well as the star power, is like, do you see Tyler Klevin as someone who pushes for a spot out of camp? We love Brandstrom, and I've been on the camp too of Klevin. Like, I think a year in the AHL would be best for his development. But I think like if Chikrin goes down and you need to bring somebody up, and they have Hamonic now as and JBD, Klevin is a great candidate to play some games this year if someone gets hurt, right? And they've got other guys too.
Yeah, I really like Tyler Klevin. I just want to make sure that and I hope that they handle him the right way, right? Like, you don't want to see him forced into a spot early on. I thought he looked good at the end of last season. But the fact that he was on the ice and he was part of this development camp, this most recent development camp, kind of leads me to believe that, okay, like, he's really going to have to fight his way. Like if he was locked in, they're like, hey, you're going to be a guy here. I don't think he would probably be part of the development camp. That's just my feeling on it. But I think he has to play. Like, so either he's in your top 6 opening night or he's in the AHL. Like, he can't be sitting there eating popcorn, watching games and waiting to come in. Like, he's got to play. Like, so my guess is Hamonic's in your opening night lineup and Brandstrom's in your opening night lineup. Now, again, maybe there's a trade at some point. Maybe something else happens, whatever. But that's my guess. My guess is that Klevin starts in the AHL, but gets games in the NHL. And JBD is going to be interesting because now they don't have the waiver exemption on him. So they have to be sure if they're going to send him down, are they sure he's going to clear? You don't want to just lose an asset that you took in the first round in, what was that, 2018? You don't want to lose a first round asset within 5 years for nothing, right? So you got to be careful with that one. But yeah, I think Klevin, like, where I pencil Klevin into the lineup more so is the following year, where I think he should be pretty much an everyday or ready to be an NHLer on most nights. I just want to make sure, and I hope that they handle him carefully, because you just don't want to see a young defenseman's confidence get kind of played with a little bit when they're playing at the NHL level.
Well, and the other thing about sorry, Jack. The other thing about that is that Brandstrom's only signed to a 1-year deal. I was kind of hoping he gets signed for multi-year, lock him up a little bit, but I think there is a very real chance he prices himself out of their range this year. Just based on last year, I thought he had just an excellent season, led them in a lot of metrics. He was the analytic darling of the team. I think there is a real chance that he's $2 million this year. Next summer, we could be looking at him, and someone might pay him like a more of a top 4 defenseman, right? One of the maybe the bottom feeding teams could give him a real shot to play some serious minutes, because Ottawa's top 4, Brandstrom being the 5th guy is awesome, but I think for his own career, he's got high potential. Like, he could break out into someone who deserves to play more minutes. So Klevin is kind of an ideal replacement, and he's your ideal physical bottom pairing guy too, right? So
yeah, and I think, look, if Erik Brandstrom prices himself out of Ottawa, while they have his rights, that's a good thing. Meaning, you should be able to flip him somewhere where he could get a top 4 role, or he could get paid like a top 4 guy, and maybe you can get assets in return that reflect that, right? Like, if we get to that point, I've always said like it would be a good, like at some point, if guys can't fit in and you're spending close to the cap, that is actually a good thing. But you want to be winning. You want to be a playoff team, right? Like you don't want to be some sort of playoff bubble team that is capped out and not able to retain its players, right? Like you look at Tampa, you've had to move on. They've had to say goodbye to guys because sorry, this guy priced himself out, and that's the way it goes. But when you have two banners hanging from your rafters, that's okay. Like guys are going to price themselves out. That's you hope that that's what happens at some point in Ottawa.
I'm just envisioning 2024 trade deadline. I'm thinking, a Brandstrom and a first round pick for Travis Konechny kind of trade going down. I just have it in my mind because Konechny would be so perfect. He'd be so perfect. And I mean, look, that would mean Brandstrom had a great season. He's going to get paid in Philly, hopefully. I'm obviously just manifesting something that hasn't happened or won't happen probably, but I think it's true. I think he could price himself out, but yeah, Cleven's a great replacement. I know for anyone who's anti-Brandstrom for some reason, just because of his size, pretty much, then Kleven is literally the ideal replacement for that. But I think also a lot, like for me, I've mentioned Tyler Kleven in his stint at the end of the season just proved that he's a much better puck mover than I thought he was. It's actually impressive how well he was able to move the puck at that size and just be that physical. It's enticing. So I'm excited to see Tyler Kleven. Another thing on JBD though, I'd be surprised if they send him down at all. I could see him not being in the opening night lineup, and I think Hamonic will get it. Whoever has the better camp will probably be in there. The thing with JBD is he makes $800K, and when you're a cap team, having that as your healthy scratch versus a Tyler Kleven who's making, I think, almost the rookie max or something. He's up there for sure. Just financially, it makes more sense to have JBD as your healthy scratch.
Yeah.
Kleven, I think you're right. As long as if he doesn't come in and blow the doors off, if no one's hurt in camp, I think he'll be in Belleville because he's on the two-way. The other guys aren't. You can't even send Hamonic down, so that just makes sense that I think he'll be in Belleville. But with injury and stuff, like Brennan said, great depth. He can just come up and play on that bottom pairing as Brandstrom slides up, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a tricky one on JBD because the Hamonic signing muddies the waters a bit for him, right? Like if they didn't bring Hamonic back, I would say JBD's got the inside track on that third pairing spot. But now I don't mind the Hamonic signing at all. Like 1.1 million. Look, if they paid Hamonic 1.7 or 2, I would say, you know what? I think that's a little much. Or if they give him a 1-year deal, okay. But they gave him 2 years, I could see people getting angry. But at 1.1, he's going to be a 6-7 guy. 6 maybe this year, maybe 7 the next year. I just think though on opening night, given what he meant to that group last year and the way I think he's pretty popular with his teammates and he put his body on the line. As long as he's healthy, I just don't see how Hamonic's not in your opening night lineup, right? Like, just feels that way for me. So, but anyway, we'll see how this. We still have whatever it is, 3 months till opening night.
Man, that hurts. I feel like it's right around the corner.
Yeah, am I right on that? Yeah, I guess It's
middle of July,
middle of October. Yeah, 3 months.
Yeah. So one thing about Hamonic, and we'll wrap up soon here, Ian. And again, thank you so much for your time and everything.
Yeah.
It's been great. But another thing with Hamonic, if I'm JBD, or just another thing about the Hamonic JBD thing, if I'm JBD, I'd be a little disgruntled, right now, just because at the end of the year we had Pierre Dorion twice in 2 separate media conferences, right, in Belleville, say it's JBD's spot to lose, and then again he said it on the Locked On Senators podcast in early June. It's his spot to lose, right? And I know he's the quote machine, all that, but that's probably just to get a player, to have give him some motivation going into camp. Yeah. That's fine. But then you go and you sign this popular veteran that was on the team in Hamonic to a 2-year deal, the same deal that you just signed a couple days before. If I'm JBD, I'm going to look at, I got to beat this guy out, which is fine. Nothing against that. It's just, I think with you go in the locker room with DJ Smith, wouldn't he feel that it's almost impossible for him to earn a spot? Because I could see a scenario where he plays much better than Hamonic, but like you mentioned, for all the other factors, Hamonic's still in the opening night lineup. And I think that
that can be a little a situation that we might have to deal with in October.
Well, yes. So like I said, I think for sure, I just, if I'm laying down money now, I think Hamonic's in your opening night lineup. But I mean, I think they play they have back-to-back games right away on the weekend at home. There's some back-to-backs. Look, this is where we're going to see if DJ Smith, and like he told me in Nashville, it's time to start benching people if they're not playing well. There's going to be consequence. There's no time, the time for developing or whatever, it's done. So theoretically, I would say that, and this isn't just exclusive to Hamonic, this is for anybody on this team, Matthew Joseph, or anybody who might be underperforming vis-a-vis their salary or their expectations. I think with the expectations being what they are for this team, you can't allow a guy to have 5, 6, 7 games. Let him work it through, let him work it out. Because as we talked about earlier, the seat's pretty hot right away, right? Like you can't have that going on. You can't allow players who are underperforming to stay in the lineup while somebody who might be more deserving is waiting in the wings when your job is potentially on the line. So I think we'll see if somebody has an unbelievable training camp, they don't get a chance to play right off the hop and the team is struggling. I'm not sure that you have any other option but to play the younger guys or the better guys.
Yeah, internal accountability has kind of been my my big thing here this offseason, because I think moving forward, it's just like you said, you've got to be able to make the hard decisions, right? You can't just defer to the veteran guy if he's not playing as well as the younger guy, which is something we've kind of seen in the past. I think internal accountability as a whole for the organization is going to be huge this year. Last one for me, I think we can kind of lead to our wrap up here. It's a bit different, but we were going to talk about it. Who do you see as a prospect who's going to make the jump this year? Because I think regardless of, and you can give us a dark horse if you want, because that's always more fun. But I think for me, it was really Greg is certainly the front runner. But yeah, if you want to throw out who you think is going to be the one to kind of maybe surprise us or make the significant jump.
So you're talking about in the to the NHL, the NHL
to make Ottawa's roster.
Yeah, I think it would have to be Ridley Gregg, wouldn't it? And that's another guy that, as we're having that conversation about, do they need to add another top 9 guy? I mean, in theory, maybe if you're willing to put him on the wing and he plays the style that he can play at the NHL level, maybe he is the internal answer. But yeah, that would be the guy that I think is going to potentially open up some eyes. And that's a function as well. It's like the pipeline is pretty dry when it comes to those type of players. I like sneaky. I like Angus Crookshank, like sneaky good. Like I was there when the young man blew out his knee in Montreal a couple years ago. I won't forget, because it was kind of in the COVID era and the arena wasn't packed. I'll never forget like the scream of pain from him. And to see him helped off the ice, and now to be able to, we're closing in on 2 years since then, potentially knock on the door, potentially get some games. Like I could see him maybe trying to scratch and claw his way into playing some games. Igor Sokolov would be, I think everyone loves the guy. I mean, anybody who's dealt with Igor Sokolov on social media, in person, whatever, you're not going to pull for anybody more than this guy. He's just a delightful young man who he just has a gregarious personality, seems to love playing, love all of it. You'd love to see him take that step. And it feels like right now there's an opening there for him too. But I don't know how that's going to play itself out for him. But yeah, I would say Ridley Gregg and Crookshank and Sokolov would be the 3 guys that I could see maybe playing some NHL games this year.
That's perfect. Yeah, there's a lot of it's a dry pipeline of prospects, but there's actually a lot of guys who might fit in a third line role in my opinion. But yeah, so we'll see how it all unfolds. Like Ian said, we have 3 months until opening night, so that puts things in perspective. It was a lot of go here for the last few weeks, but it should settle down a little bit. And that'll be all we have today. So Ian, again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been awesome to get to chat with you again. And again, we stretch close to an hour. It's kind of our theme here. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, you got it, guys. A pleasure to join. And listen, anytime you want to hit me up and do this, I'm always game. And listen, hopefully you enjoy the rest of your summer. And Jack, we got to get out. We got to get out for some golf again. one of these days.
Look, I'm on the a hiatus a little bit. I was golfing so much lately, and I've been off for a week, and I feel good, but I want to get back out there. Yeah, so we'll definitely get that going. The Ascends Twitter golf tournament. I think are you?
I think I'm part of that. It's the end of August. Are both of you part of that?
I don't know if Brennan is.
God, I can. I've been trying to pick up golf, and I'm no good. It is extremely difficult, and I respect you guys for being good at it.
No, we never said we were good at it.
Yeah,
We just said we golfed.
thing.
Actually, Jack is good. I've watched Jack.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was humbled with Callum Fraser. I'll give him a little shout out here. I know
Callum Fraser. I golfed with him last week, and he's got the most unbelievable swing. Like, it's so smooth, but like he does it with violence isn't the right word, but like he does it with such I guess it's a violent, smooth swing, if that makes sense. And
it's gracefully powerful.
Yes, and it's remarkable to watch him hit a golf ball. It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's our golf segment for the Everyday Sens podcast here on episode 25. So again, everyone, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're not on the YouTube, head over to the YouTube, subscribe. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We just passed 800, so we want to thank everyone for that. Leave a like and a comment. Subscribe to everydaysens.com, and we'll see everyone next time.